Everyone in the village saw her beauty. Nobody saw the marks on her back. Nobody knew where she went when she closed her eyes. Nobody knew she was not sleeping. She was walking. Every single night, in a place that had no mercy. In a world that did not care whether she was tired or broken or bleeding. In a world that only cared whether she could still be used. My name is Jessie, your narrator. And the girl I am about to tell you about was 18 years old. She thought she had received the greatest blessing of her life. She had no idea she had signed the most dangerous contract in the history of her village. A contract written not on a paper, written on her wrist, in twisted dark metal, with a single pale stone set into it. And the moment she put it on, something very old and very patient and very hungry smiled. This is the story of Adaeze, and the bracelet she should never have accepted, and what it cost her every single night while the village slept, and what finally came to set her free. Stay with me, because this story does not end where you think it ends. Her full name was Adaeze Okonkwo, 18 years old, the first child of a widow named Shioma, who had been carrying the weight of 2 children and a failing farm since her husband died 2 years before. Adaeze was not remarkable to look at. Not in the way the village noticed. She was simply there, present, moving through the village the way most people move through a place that does not particularly register their existence. What she was determined. Quietly and completely, without drama, determined. She was the first person in her family to make it to secondary school. She walked 40 minutes each way every day. She sat at the front of every class because she had decided that education was the specific tool that was going to change the shape of her family's life, and she intended to use it correctly. Her teachers noticed her work, or rather, they should have. The problem was that Adaeze was unremarkable, in the way that quite determined girls are unremarkable in a crowded classroom. Her essay were good, her mathematics was solid, but nobody was looking at her hard enough to notice. She was not happy, but she was tired in the specific way of someone who can see exactly what they need to do and cannot quite reach the resources to do it. She wanted to be seen, not for vanity, for purpose. That want was the door the old woman walked through. She was sitting at the side of the path. Adaeze almost did not see her. The path through the old part of the village was quiet at that hour. Adaeze took it because it was shorter and because the quiet was useful for thinking. The old woman was simply there, as though she had always been there and Adaeze had simply not been paying attention before. Ancient in a way that was difficult to process, the kind of old that has stopped being a number. Her eyes were the color of still water. Her hands were smooth in a way that old hands are never smooth. Adaeze greeted her respectfully and turned to continue walking. The old woman called her by name, Adaeze. She stopped. She turned around. The old woman was holding a bracelet, twisted dark metal with a single pale stone catching the last of the evening light in a way that metal and stone should not catch light. She said she had been watching Adaeze, that she wanted to give her a gift, that the bracelet would bring beauty and intelligence, that teachers would notice her, that people would turn when she walked past. The conditions were simple. Never remove the bracelet. Adaeze thought about her mother's tired face, about the school fees, about the teachers who had never looked hard enough. She took the bracelet. She slipped it onto her left wrist. It fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting for her wrist for a very long time. She looked up to thank the old woman. The path was empty. No footprints. Not a single mark in the dust where the old woman had been sitting. Adaeze stood alone on the path in the fading light. She looked at the bracelet. The pale stone caught the last of the evening light. And for 1 second, just 1 second, she felt cold. Then it passed, and she walked home. She fell asleep that night within minutes of lying down. Deeper than usual, the specific pull of sleep that does not feel like rest, but like something pulling you down with purpose. And she woke up somewhere else. Not with the gradual confusion of a dream, with the immediate full consciousness of someone who has been moved, who was in one place and is now in another and knows completely that both places are real. The sky was wrong. A deep bruised purple with no stars. Just that flat wrong color stretching in every direction. The ground was hard under her feet. The air was cold. The specific cold of a place that has never been touched by sunlight. And there were figures, almost human in shape, close enough to register as person, but wrong in the specific way that a reflection in disturbed water is wrong. One of them pointed at her, then pointed at a pile of heavy clay pots. And that was how the first night began. She carried the pot until her arms shook. She tended things that were almost animal but not quite. When she was too slow, something struck her across the back. Then she was in her bed, morning light through the window. Her arms ached. A real mark stretched across her shoulder blade. She had no explanation. She went to school and told herself it was a nightmare. She almost believed it. 2 weeks after she put on the bracelets, the village began to notice Adaeze. Not gradually, all at once, as though something had been adjusted in the way the world processed her image. Her skin began to carry a quality that had no natural explanation. Something in the way light interacted with it, as though it had learned to hold light slightly longer than it should before releasing it. When she walked into a room, something shifted. People looked up from what they were doing before they knew they were doing it. At school, her mathematics teacher stopped mid-lesson to read her answer to the class. Her English teacher said her last essay was the best thing she had read from a student in 3 years. The village began to talk. Adaeze Okonkwo, the widow's daughter. What happened to that girl? Where did she come from? Her mother wept the first time a neighbor said, "Your daughter is becoming something remarkable." Adaeze felt it. The being seen, the doors beginning to open. She told herself the exhaustion was adjustment. She told herself the marks were stress. She believed both of these things completely because she needed to. The king's daughter came to find her on a Thursday morning. Nnenna, the princess of Oguta, 19 years old, and the standard by which every other girl in the village had been measured for as long as anyone could remember. She had always been the most admired person in every room she entered. Until Adaeze. Most girls in Nnenna's position would have responded with resentment. Nnenna did something different. She came to find Adaeze at the school gate and said simply, "I want to know you." Adaeze said, "Okay." They walked together. They talked. Nnenna was careful about closeness because She had spent her whole life uncertain which people were present with her and which were present with her position. But she was not careful with Adaeze, because Adaeze was not impressed by her title, was not performing for her, was just a girl talking about her mother's farm and her brother's noise and the mathematics teacher who finally knew her name. Her village watched and added this to the story they were building about Adaeze Okonkwo. Some of them asked her directly, "What is your secret? You were not like this before. What changed?" Adaeze touched the bracelet on her wrist when they asked. She did not know why she did this. She said nothing changed. I just worked harder. She said it convincingly because she was not lying. She just did not know what kind of work she was doing. Every night was the same. The moment she fell asleep, the bracelet pulled her. Not her body, her. The part of her that thought and felt and suffered. The part that woke up sore. The sky always that same bruised purple. No stars, no light source, just flat cold illumination. Different work on different nights, carrying heavy pots across distances that extended as she walked. The moment she thought she was close, the destination moved. Some nights, the almost animals, things that looked approximately like cattle and approximately like goats, but shared characteristic with neither. They watched her with an awareness that animals should not have. Some nights she feels land stretching beyond any reasonable horizon. Work that a healthy adult man would find punishing and that an 18-year-old found annihilating. When she was too slow, they corrected her. Not with words, with the specific instrument of a realm that understood pain was the most efficient communication. She was not the only one there. She tried once to make eye contact with another worker, a woman of perhaps 30 who moved with the specific resignation of someone who had been doing this for a very long time. The woman looked through her, as though hope of connection had been removed from her so completely she no longer processed it as available. Adaeze looked at the woman's wrist. A bracelet, different from hers, different metals, different stone, the same basic contracts. She looked around the realm. How many of them were there? Then something struck her back and she went back to work. And in the morning, she woke up with the question still in her mind. And the bracelet was still on her wrist and 3 new marks on her arms. 3 months after she put on the bracelet, Adaeze slept in class for the first time. Not a nod. She put her head on her desk in the middle of a mathematics lesson and did not hear the teacher call her name 4 times. The essay that had been earning her recognition began to lose their edge. Gradually, the way a sharp thing becomes dull when it is used too much against a hard surface. Her mother noticed. The way mothers notice things their children are trying to hide. Not through specific evidence, through the specific feeling of something being wrong in the temperature of the house. She saw the marks on Adaeze's arm. She said, "What are these?" Adaeze said she thought she was crushing herself in her sleep. Her mother looked at the mark for a long time. They were not scratches. 2 clinics, 2 doctors, same conclusion each time. Adaeze was perfectly healthy. Adaeze was disappearing. One morning, her mother saw a long welt across her back while she was dressing. She said, "Adaeze, who did this to you?" Adaeze said nobody. She had been asleep. Her mother sat on the bed. She said quietly, "We needed to find out what is happening to my child." Not in panic, in the specific cold determination that lives on the other side of panic. She started paying attention deliberately. The nights she was the most exhausted were the nights she fell asleep fastest. The bracelet put her more efficiently when she was already depleted. The marks on her body appeared only on her left side, the side the bracelet was on. She tried to remove the bracelet once. The sickness was immediate and total. Not nausea, something deeper. The specific agony of a part of herself being pulled away from the rest, like trying to separate something fused. She released it. The sickness stopped immediately. She sat on the edge of her bed breathing and understood the bracelet could not be removed by her. She thought about the old woman, the smooth hand, the still water eyes, the footprints that were not there, the condition. Never remove the bracelet. She had thought it was a superstition, a simple rule. She understood now it was not a rule. It was a warning. Not warning her against removing it for her own safety. Warning her that she could not remove it at all, because the old woman had known exactly what she was giving Adaeze, and she said nothing about it. Adaeze sat with the bracelet on her wrist and the understanding that something had been done to her deliberately by something that had called her by name on a quiet path, that had known exactly what she wanted and had used that wanting against her. Pastor Chukwuemeka arrived in Oguta on a Wednesday. 50 years old, 30 years in ministry. The specific quality of someone who had seen the invisible dimension of the world often enough that nothing surprises him, but everything still matters to him. He had not been invited. He was traveling through. His driver had engine trouble 3 miles outside the village. While they waited, he asked permission to hold a 3-night crusade in the village square. The first night drew a modest crowd. The second night drew none. Adaeze's mother heard about it on the second day. She had tried the clinic, the herbalist. She had prayed alone in her room every night for 3 weeks. She told Adaeze they were going on the 3rd night. Adaeze said okay, the way people say okay when they have run out of resistance. They arrived as the gathering was already full. Adaeze sat beside her mother at the back. Exhausted, she had walked the previous night until something in her arms gave out, and they had caged her for the remaining hours. She had woken with both hands shaking. She sat in the plastic chair, and the pastor began to pray. The pastor stopped in the middle of a sentence. He looked across the gathering. His eyes moved through the crowd with the focused attention of someone looking for something they can feel, but have not yet located visually. They stopped on Adaeze. She felt the moment they stopped on her, because the bracelet on her wrist vibrated. One sharp pause, like something being seen that did not want to be seen. The pastor said there is someone here tonight carrying something they were given by someone they did not know. What looks like a blessing has a chain attached to it. The person wearing this chain is being taken somewhere every night. She is not sleeping. She said, "Come forward." Adaeze did not move for a long moment. Her mother looked at her. The pastor was looking directly at her with the specific quality of someone who can see something attached to her that nobody else could see. She stood up. Her mother stood beside her. They walked to the front. The pastor looked at the bracelet, then at her face. He said, "Who gave you this?" She described everything: the parts, the smooth hand, the still water eyes, the footprints that were not there. He listened to all of it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he told her everything. The old woman was not human. The bracelet was a contract. Every night her spirit was taken to labor in a realm that ran on stolen human energy. The beauty and intelligence were real, but they were powered by what was being extracted from her while she sleeps. He said, the bracelet is feeding on you. He said, you have been paying for your own beauty with your own life every night. Since the day you put it on, Adaeze's mother made a sound. Adaeze stood very still. She thought about the nights, the pots, the cage, the woman who would not look at her. The pastor said the bracelet must be broken. He said she must be willing to lose everything it gave her. Adaeze thought about Nnenna, about her teacher, about her mother's proud smile. Then she thought about the cage, about waking up with the shaking hands, about the woman who had stopped being able to hope. She looked at the pastor. She said, break it. The prayer began quietly. Not the performance of prayer, the real thing. 30 years of practice spiritual authority applied to a specific target with the full intention. The pastor placed his hands over Adaeze's wrist, above the bracelet, acknowledging the space it occupied without conceding its claim. He named it Adaeze, the Dark Queen. He named it clearly and directly, and without the hesitation of someone afraid of what happens when you name things. And in Adaeze's realm, something happened. The bruised purple sky flickered. The figures directing the workers stopped moving. They turned. The way things turn when they feel something coming from a direction they did not expect. The pastor continued. Volume is not the quality that spiritual authority expresses itself through. It expresses itself through certainty, through the specific frequency of someone who knows what they are and knows what they are doing. In the realm, the structures began to vibrate. The almost animal made wrong sounds. The workers stopped working and looked around. The woman with the bracelet, who had stopped being able to hope, looked up. For the first time in a very long time, she looked up. She came, not in the working world, in the space between worlds where the prayer and the contract were meeting. Adaeze, the Dark Queen. She was not dramatic, not theoretical. She was ancient. Ancient in the way something is ancient when it has been operating the same way for so many generations it had forgotten there was ever a time when it did not. She addressed the prayer directly. She said, who gave you the right to interfere with what belonged to me? This girl came to me willingly. She accepted the gift willingly. She wore the bracelet willingly. There is a contract. You have no authority here. The prayer did not argue. The prayer continued. Adaeze pushed harder. The bracelet on Adaeze's wrist grew hot. Adaeze did not pull away. In the realm, the cracking of the sky deepened. Lines of warm light appearing in the bruised purple, coming from outside the realm entirely. Adaeze called on everything available to her. She sent it all against the prayer. A wave of spiritual pressure that hit the gathering as a sudden cold. The pastor held. His congregation prayed with him, and Adaeze opened her mouth and prayed too. Not in the practical language of 30 years, in the raw, desperate language of a girl who has been carrying pots in a realm with a bruised purple sky for 6 months and has had enough. She prayed with everything she had left, and everything she had left turned out to be more than Adaeze had calculated. The battle was not the kind that could be seen. It was a battle of authority. 2 realms on the same ground. Adaeze fought with everything she had. She sent confusion into the gathering. She sent pressure against the pastor's voice. She sent the bracelet heat higher. Adaeze gripped her own wrist. She held on. The pastor's congregation prayed louder. In the realm, the cracking of the sky became structural. The lines of warm light widening, spreading, reaching the floor and moving along it. Wherever the light touched the ground, the hardness of it softened. The compressed earth of a realm built on extraction, relaxing under the contract of something operating on entirely different principle. Mythology appeared directly in the center of the realm, her full ancient authority present in the space. "Who are you?" she said. "Who are you to destroy what I have planted? Who gave you the authority to challenge what was freely given?" The prayer answered her, not in words, in light, in the specific warmth of something that has always been stronger than the cold of a realm that feed on people in their sleep. Mythology took a step back, then another. The pastor anointed Adaeze's wrist with oil. The bracelet screamed. Not a sound the gathering heard with their ears. A vibration through the wrist, through the arm, through the whole body. Adaeze felt it in her teeth, in her chest. She held on. She prayed harder. And in the realm, Mythology took one final step back, and the bracelet broke. The pieces fell on the ground. 3 pieces of twisted dark metal, the pale stone among them, grey now, the color of something emptied. The heat in Adaeze's wrist stopped instantly. In the realm of Mythology, the bruised purple sky went dark, total and immediate, the darkness of a power source being cut. The structure fell silent. The almost animal were gone. The figures that had directed the workers stood motionless. The workers looked at their wrists. Some of them looked up. Some of them reached for each other. Adaeze would never know what happened to them after that night. She would wonder for the rest of her life. She would hope. But right now she was in the village square looking at the piece of the bracelet on the ground. And she was about to discover the price of breaking it. Because in the second after the bracelet broke, she felt something leave her. Not painfully, not violently. Like air leaving a space held under pressure. She looked at her mother. Her mother's face told her everything before she found a mirror. Her mother said Adaeze, just her name, in the specific tone of a mother looking at her child and using all of her self-control to respond correctly. Adaeze found a mirror the next morning. The glow was gone, obviously, expected. But it was not just the glow. What looked back at her from the mirror was not the girl she had been before the bracelet. Mythology had taken something extra in the moment of the contract breaking. The way a thief who is caught takes something on the way out they were not even there for originally. She went to school. The teachers who had been praising her looked at her with polite confusion. The recognition was gone with the glow. She walked through the village. People looked through her. One woman said to another as she passed, "What happened to that girl? She used to be so striking. Did she get sick?" Adaeze walked home. She sat on her bed. She looked at the empty space on her wrist. Her mother came in, sat beside her, took her hands. She said, "This is not the end." She said, "You are still here." She said, "This is what matters." Adaeze said, "I know." She said it the way people say things they believe completely and are finding it very hard to feel it the exact moment. And the pastor came back the next morning and said they were not finished. 3 days of fasting and prayer. The pastor, Adaeze, her mother, her brother Chede, who had never fasted in his life and was finding it extremely difficult, but was present every session without being asked twice. This prayer was different from the battle prayer. The battle prayer had been directed against Ezoji's claim. This prayer was directed towards Adaeze, specifically, precisely, like a doctor working on a specific wound. The pastor prayed for restoration, not for what the bracelet had added, for what Adaeze had brought to that path on the evening she met the old woman. Her own intelligence, her own quiet determination, her own specific way of being present in the world. The first day, nothing visible happened, but she slept properly, deeply, without being pulled anywhere, without waking exhausted, without marks. She lay in her bed in the morning and felt the ordinary miracle of having slept and woken without being used. She cried quietly into her pillow so her mother would not hear. The second day her mind was clearer. Not the borrowed sharpness of the bracelet, the specific clarity of a mind that has been rested. She picked up her mathematics textbook, read 10 pages, understood them completely on the first read. She put the book down. She said a quiet thank you to something she could not see but was beginning to feel very clearly. The third day, something shifted. Quietly, the way a light comes back when power is restored after a long outage. Not flooding in, returning, steady and warm and completely itself. Adaeze stood up on the morning of the third day. She went to the small mirror on the wall. She looked at herself, and she was there. Not the bracelet version, not Ezoji's manufactured presentation. Adaeze, with her own face, her own eyes, the specific light in them that had been there since she was a child and had nothing to do with any bracelet ever made. She stood at the mirror for a long time, then she smiled. Not at the reflection, at herself. Nnenna came on the morning of the fourth day. Just Nnenna, no palace attendants, simple wrapper. Adaeze answered the door. She waited for what most people had given her since the bracelet broke. The polite confusion, the not quite placing her. Nnenna said, I heard what happened. Adaeze said, yes. Nnenna said, I want to still be your friend. She said, I cannot tell you the glow was not part of what first drew me to you, because it was, but I have been watching you for 6 months. She said, I watched you fall asleep in class and get back up and keep going. I watched you walk 40 minutes to school every morning looking like you had not slept properly in weeks and still sit at the front. I watched you come home and work on the farm and study in the evening and never once complain. She said, Adaeze, the bracelet gave you beauty that anyone could see. She said, what you have underneath, it is something I have never had. She said, that is what I want to be near. Adaeze looked at the king's daughter standing at her door choosing her. Not because of what something ancient had manufactured, because of what she actually was. She stepped aside. She said, come in. Nnenna smiled and came in. She went back to school on a Monday morning. The same work, 40 minutes, the same parts, the same book in her arms. People looked at her the way they looked at most people, without the arrested attention the bracelet had produced. Ordinary. She had thought this would hurt more than it did. She walked through the gates, sat at the front of her first class. At the end of the lesson, the teacher collected homework. She collected Adaeze's essay. She glanced at it. Read the first paragraph. Read it again. She looked up at Adaeze. Not with the confused recognition of someone trying to place a face. With the specific recognition of someone encountering something genuinely good. She said, stay after class. Adaeze stayed. The teacher said, this is excellent work. I want to enter this for the district essay competition. With your permission. Adaeze said yes. She said of course. She walked out of the classroom into the school corridor. She looked at her left wrist, the empty wrist where the bracelet had been. She thought about what the bracelet had given her, and she thought about what she had just received, without it, in her own name. And she walked down the corridor, and for the first time in 6 months, she was not tired. The old woman was never seen in Oguta again. The path through the old part of the village was unchanged. Red dust, quiet, ordinary. Adaeze passed it every day on her way to school. She never saw footsteps there. She kept walking. She won the district essay competition 3 months later. The prize was a scholarship. Not large, large enough. The specific size of enough that a girl who has been working with exactly that amount for 2 years knows how to use completely. Her mother cried. Shady said he was not crying, he was crying. Nnenna was there. She had been there through the 3 days of fasting, through the first week back to school, through the essay competition preparation, present in the specific way that people are present when they have chosen someone rather than being drawn to them by something external. Real friendship. The kind that does not require a bracelet to produce. Pastor Chukwuemeka came to the compound before he left Oguta. He said a prayer for Adaeze and her family. He looked at the girl who had prayed with everything she had left in a village square. He said she would be fine. She said, thank you. He said, do not thank me. He said, when you opened your mouth and prayed without nothing left, you brought something into that village square that I could not have brought myself. He said, remember that. He said, the next time something comes to you dressed as a gift and asks you to give up nothing in return, he said, remember that the prize is always there. He said, the only question is whether they tell you what it is before you accept or after. Adaeze watched him drive away. She stood at the edge of the compound in the morning light. She looked at her left wrist. Empty. Clean. Real. She thought about the girl she had been on the evening she took the quiet path. Tired. Overlooked. Wanting to be seen. She thought about the girl she was now. Still tired sometimes. Still overlooked sometimes. Still wanting to be seen, but differently now. Because she had learned the difference between being seen and being real. The bracelet had made her visible. The 3 days of prayer had made her herself and herself. It turned out was enough. Had always been enough. She went inside. Her mother was making breakfast. Shady was being loud about something. The smell of food. The specific warmth of a house that is whole. Adaeze walked into the kitchen. She sat down at the table. She ate breakfast, and she cast a shadow on the floor in the morning light. Her own shadow. Dark and solid and real, belonging entirely to her. This has been Whispers of the Forbidden, where some stories were never meant to be told, but needed to be told. For more of this story, please don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and comment where you are watching from.